हरिओम एवं हरे राम। सभी ऑनलाइन सत्संगियों का अभिनंदन है हमारे आज के स्वामी धर्मदास दरबार दिल्ली के बुधवार शाम के ऑनलाइन सत्संग में। बोलिए सद्गुरुओं की जय, स्वामी धर्मदास साहब की जय, स्वामी अटल राम साहब की जय, स्वामी पेसुराम साहब की जय, सभी संत महात्माओं की जय, सभी भक्तों की जय। I will start with something that we left or talked about briefly last Wednesday. वो है सिंधी कल्चर दिवस। 5 दिसंबर को वो था और वो हाल में ही हमने प्रोग्राम दरबार के वेंसडे प्रोग्राम में किया था, छोटा सा नंद भाटिया जी द्वारा। As the heat and the dust of the celebration of the culture day settles down, I think it's time to reflect on what culture actually means and to reflect very briefly again on Sindhi culture. Very briefly and etymologically, the English word culture comes from the Latin root cultura or cultus, meaning to care, and in French, coller, to till, as in to till the ground, खेती करना, यानी to cultivate. हिंदी में कहें तो संस्कृति, संस्कार शब्द से आती है। सम करोति इति, अच्छी तरह करना, सुधारना, किसी वस्तु आदि की त्रुटियां निकाल विकार दूर कर उपयोगी और निर्मल बनाना, परिष्कार करना। जैसे हम कहते हैं बच्चा संस्कारी है। हमारे यहाँ यानी सनातन धर्म में 16 संस्कारों की बात की गई है। जन्म से मृत्यु तक के 16 कृत्य या यूं कहें सुकृत्य, जिसमें मुंडन, यज्ञोपवीत या जनेऊ एज वी नो इट, विवाह आदि संस्कार, मन पर पड़ी गहरी छाप, जैसे कहते हैं इसमें पूजा पाठ के संस्कार हैं। यू कैन कॉल इट अलंकरण या सजावट एक्सेट्रा। अंग्रेजी में कहते हैं ना एग्रीकल्चर, खेती, सेरिकल्चर इज सिल्कवर्म खेती, टिश्यू कल्चर इन द लैब या वर्क कल्चर की बात करते हैं, यूथ कल्चर की बात करते हैं, एंड हाई फैशन इज कॉल्ड हॉट कुटूर एज वी ऑल नो। Therefore, culture includes all customs, ideas, beliefs of a particular society, country, people, or age group. All ways of life, including arts, beliefs, institutions of a population that are passed down from generation to generation. The way of life of an entire society, which includes its codes of manners, dress, language, religion, rituals, art, etc. Sindhi culture, therefore, is encompassed by all that goes by the name of Sindhiyat. Before we dwell on that, briefly on what is pop culture and deep culture. Rajiv Malhotra ji, an Indian-born American who is by training a scientist, a technologist, a computer engineer, a corporate professional as well as a businessman, and who has made a living for himself in the last 40 years in America, has turned to writing on India exclusively, on her culture and civilization from an Indian point of view and not necessarily from a Western one, which we have been used to so far. He divides culture into 2 aspects. He calls one pop culture or popular culture and the other deep or high culture. Pop is that which is popular, which is easy to understand, entertaining to the majority of the young, such as fashion, music, entertainment, films, videos, technology, slang, etc. कभी-कभी पॉप या पॉपुलर कल्चर को नेगेटिव या इंफीरियर सेंस में भी लिया जाता है। पॉप कहें तो सिंधी में अक्सर पॉपुलर है लोली, कोकी, लाल साईं, सिंधी पकोड़ा, टुक, सिंधी कड़ी, सिंधी साई भाजी, अजरक, पिंगो, लाल मुंजी पत रखियो भला, all that Sindhis are known for ऊपर से। And the other he calls deep culture or high culture, more sophisticated, intellectually challenging and intrinsically rewarding. Works of art, literature, scholarship and philosophy that establish a shared frame for the educated people. The Sindhi deep culture would represent the Sindhi rich folk traditions, Sindhi tasawwuf or Sufiwad, the deep integration of Vedantic Tattvamasi with Anil Haq of Sufiwad and Ik Onkar Satnam, the Mool Mantra of the Sikh tradition, into a unified whole. It would represent, for instance, the writings of Kajal, Sami, Sarmast, and the big greats of Sindhi literature, their saint poets. The writings of Sindhi saints, fakirs, Guru Nanak Ji, the writings of our Sadgurus, which are truly deeply multicultural and secular, and these, of course, are at the base of the pyramid that forms and supports the Sindhi cultural superstructure represented by its pop culture about which we just spoke, and which makes any Sindhi not just an astute businessman as he is known the world over, but also a man who is rich of culture, civilization and spirituality. Max Weber, writing at the time when capitalism was at its peak in Europe, wrote a book called Max Weber, The Logic of Protestant Ethics. उनका ये कहना था कि प्रोटेस्टेंटिज्म जो कि क्रिश्चियनिटी के अंदर तब रिफॉर्म मूवमेंट में के रूप में स्टैब्लिश हुआ था, उसके एथिक्स ऐसे हैं जिससे कि मटेरियल सक्सेस भी कैपिटलिस्ट को मिल रहा है. I mean, the theory has long been discredited, but perhaps it is time to reflect on what in the Sindhi culture, what in the teachings of our saints and sages, which Sindhis have imbibed over generations, make them such successful professionals, especially in business and in the corporate world. I would close on culture by quoting Sadhu Vaswani and then Sadguru Swami Dharamdas Sahab. Sadhu Vaswani succinctly puts it, blurring the academic distinction between high and low or deep culture. And he says, I have seen more culture in some peasant's cottage than in many a college club. Book knowledge stays in the head and culture flows into life. Book knowledge is heavy, culture gives understanding and so reduces the friction of life. Culture weaves understanding and gentleness with actual living. No one is truly cultured who does not show a courtesy to those whom accident has made his inferiors, the poor, the needy, the negligible, the weak in the society. The soul of culture is courtesy. A man of culture is a man of reverence. Quoting Goethe, the German poet, he writes, reverence for what is above, around, below and beneath him. Such a cultured man rises above creeds. He worships in every shrine. The cultured man has humility of spirit. He does not impose his opinion on you. Man of culture has knowledge of relative values, so he neither insists nor dogmatizes. He has the gift of gentleness, the humility of spirit, so very truly Sindhi. For such a man, freedom manifests itself as justice, first towards others. Creating a noble culture, he says, the noblest work is to cultivate the soul. And who but the saints and fakirs and the dervishes of Sindh will help us do that. Let me give the last word on culture to Swami Dharamdas Sahab Ji and note the use of the agricultural terminology in what he says, very important. And this is from Sadguru Sikya. He traces the spiritual journey in 7 steps and he says, Sach Khand Vase Nirankar. अर्थात निरंकार जे दर्शन अभिलाषीअ लाइ बिल्कुल ज़रूरी आहे त सचखंड जी माडीअ जे पहुचण लाइ ही डाकण चढ़े जंहिं जा 7 डाका आहिनि. So I will not talk about the 7 dakas, but the 5th and the 6th one are important from cultural point of view. पंजो डाको आहे तलाश सचे सतगुरु जी जिन जुगती मिले. जुगतीअ मां भक्ति मिलंदी ऐं भक्तिअ मां मुक्ति मिलंदी. अर्थात जुगतीअ मां हृदय जी ज़मीन साफ़ करे उनमें महबूब जी महर जे मींहं जे बूंदनि सां मुहबत जे रेज़ जो रुख ॾेई सची सिखिया जो बिज पोखनि. इहो ॾाको आहे सतगुरुअ वटां मिलियल सची सिखिया जे बिज मां 2 टारियूं फुटनि. सबनी प्राण धार्युं लाई दया, शास्त्र अनुसार निष्काम जीव्रत, नेम ए पुण्य करण, सर्वस दान देई पाण लाई, सिवाय प्रीतम जे बियो कुछ भी न बचाए. So that was Swami Dharamdas Darbar talking of the 7 steps to spirituality and note the use of agricultural terms in that. In the Sanatan culture, and Rajiv Malhotra calls it a dharmic culture to distinguish it from the other cultures of the world. Only yesterday we had Gita Jayanti, मार्ग शीर्ष महीने की शुक्ल पक्ष की एकादशी. वो कल मंगलवार को थी, उसे मोक्षदा एकादशी भी बोलते हैं. And the importance of Bhagavad Gita in the lives of us, not only Sanatan Dharmis but everywhere in the world, can never be overstressed. I would leave the details for another day, but I would like to close today by quoting a small incident from the life of Indira Nooyi, who was the head of PepsiCo worldwide. And it is important as we speak of the Bhagavad Gita, because Indira Nooyi has been a kind of ideal for the younger generation, whom the Darbar is trying to get into its fold, whom the Darbar is trying to inspire to follow the teachings of the Sadgurus. And in the context of Gita Jayanti, which talks about dharma and karma, dharma as in the right action that one has to do at the right time. So therefore this little snippet from her life, which is quoted in her biography, My Life in Full, a biography, and this is for all the millennials, that teach them the sanskar of karma and dharma and how is it is taught at home. कहते हैं कि जिस दिन इंदिरा नोई, इंडियन बॉर्न अमेरिकन फ्रॉम चेन्नई, को पेप्सिको वर्ल्ड वाइड का चेयरमैन बनाया गया, वो भागी भागी घर आई. उनकी अपनी माँ खुद घर में थी, उनके हस्बैंड और दोनों बच्चे, लड़कियाँ थी. सो शी यूज्ड टू टेक केयर ऑफ द चिल्ड्रन व्हाइल इंदिरा जी एंड हस्बैंड राज वेर एट वर्क. और शी वांटेड टू गिव दिस न्यूज़ टू हर मदर कि माँ आज मुझे पेप्सिको का चेयरमैन बना दिया गया. As soon as she entered the home, she said, "Ma, I have great news for you, perhaps the greatest in my life." माँ ने कहा, न्यूज़ व्यूज़ बाद में बताना इंदिरा, घर में दूध नहीं है, go get milk. And she had to drive for hours to get that milk packet. और ultimately जब वो वापस आई और उन्होंने पूछा कि राज भी तो घर में थे, the mother said, and she was Indira's mother, राज थके हुए थे. जब तुम घर में आती हो, leave the crown in the garage. In the home, you are a mother, you are a sister, you are a daughter and a daughter-in-law. That shows किस परिस्थिति में कौन सा कर्म आपका धर्म है is important, and that was taught to Arjuna in the battlefield by Shri Krishna. On that note, I would ask our special guest today, Kailash Balani ji, to start the Bhakti Sangeet. धन्यवाद.